In 1928, Alexander Fleming noticed something growing in a petri dish that wasn't supposed to be there. A mold, a contamination, something most researchers would have thrown away. He didn't throw it away. He looked closer, and what he found in that accidental growth eventually became penicillin, the compound that changed the course of modern medicine. Here is what that story quietly contains. The most powerful antimicrobial discoveries in human history have often come not from laboratories, but from things growing in places nobody was paying attention to. Your backyard is one of those places. What we are going to look at today are 12 plants, weeds, most of them, that researchers have studied specifically for their antimicrobial and immune-supporting properties. Plants your grandparents' generation knew by name. Plants growing in your garden, your lawn, your local fields right now. Number 1. Stinging nettle. Few plants introduce themselves as memorably as stinging nettle. Brush against it once, and you remember it for hours. Tiny hollow hairs along the leaves inject a mixture of compounds that produces the familiar burning sensation. It seems almost designed to be avoided. For thousands of years, people reached for it anyway. Across Europe, Asia, and North America, stinging nettle was gathered every spring as one of the year's first nourishing plants. Roman soldiers are recorded as rubbing fresh nettles onto their legs before long marches through the cold provinces of Britain to stimulate circulation. Medieval herbalists prescribed it for joint discomfort, seasonal allergies, and general vitality after the long winter months. Modern research has revealed why it earned such a reputation. Stinging nettle contains quercetin, kaempferol, chlorophyll, carotenoids, and an exceptional concentration of minerals, including iron, calcium, magnesium, and potassium. Clinical studies have found that freeze-dried nettle leaf may help reduce symptoms of seasonal allergies by influencing inflammatory pathways involved in histamine release, while laboratory research has documented antimicrobial activity against several common bacterial species. For people over 60, the nutritional profile may be just as valuable as the antimicrobial one. Immune resilience depends not only on fighting microbes, but on maintaining the micronutrients that immune cells require to function efficiently. Once briefly blanched or steeped, the sting disappears completely. Young spring leaves make an excellent soup or tea, with a rich, earthy flavor somewhere between spinach and green tea. Sometimes the plant that asks you to keep your distance turns out to be one of the most generous. Number 2. Broadleaf plantain. There is a plant growing in the crack of the pavement outside your front door. Almost certainly, you have probably stepped over it without registering it. Native American peoples across the continent called it white man's footprint because it appeared wherever European settlers walked, spreading in disturbed soil, in paths, in settlements. Two completely separate medical traditions, with no shared documentation, independently identified it as a wound herb and respiratory plant. The active compound relevant here is aucubin, an iridoid glycoside that has been studied for antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and liver protective properties. A 2010 review in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, analyzing 49 separate studies on Plantago major, confirmed antimicrobial activity against several bacterial strains, alongside documented wound healing and anti-inflammatory effects across multiple tissue systems. For people over 60, the respiratory application is particularly relevant. Plantain leaves contain mucilage, a gel-forming compound that coats inflamed mucous membranes in the throat and respiratory tract, reducing irritation, while the aucubin works on a separate antimicrobial pathway simultaneously. The two mechanisms do not compete. They complement each other in the same cup of tea. Steep dried or fresh young plantain leaves in just boiled water for 10 minutes. The flavor is mild, slightly green, undemanding. Drink it at the onset of a sore throat or chest irritation. This is what it was for. It is growing in the pavement crack. It has always been there. You have simply not needed it until now. Number 3. Yarrow. The name itself is a historical document. Achilleia, from Achilles. The Greek myth holds that Achilles carried yarrow into battle and used it on the wounds of his soldiers at Troy. Whether the story is literal or mythological, it encodes a real and widely practiced tradition. Yarrow was the battlefield wound herb of ancient Europe, used not because of belief alone, but because it worked consistently enough to earn a place in military medicine across centuries. In World War I, field medics still carried yarrow as a hemostatic agent. The modern pharmaceutical compound tranexamic acid, used today to control surgical bleeding, works through platelet aggregation, the same basic mechanism that yarrow's achillin compound promotes through a different pathway. The antimicrobial research on yarrow is specific. A 2011 study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology confirmed yarrow essential oil demonstrated inhibitory activity against Staphylococcus aureus, E. coli, and Candida albicans, three of the most clinically relevant organisms for older adults. After 60, wound healing slows, skin integrity changes, urinary tract infections become more common, fungal issues, particularly Candida, become more prevalent in people on long-term medications or with altered gut flora. Yarrow's documented activity across all three of these organisms makes it one of the most relevant plants on this entire list for the specific biological context of aging. Yarrow tea, fresh or dried flowers and leaves steeped 10 minutes, is the traditional preparation. The flavor is aromatic and slightly bitter. Drink it. Grow it in any dry, neglected corner of the garden. It flourishes in the places where other plants refuse to. Number 4. Elderflower. Most people know elderberry, the dark autumn fruit. Fewer know that the flower, harvested in late spring before the berries form, has a distinct and separately researched profile that is quietly one of the most relevant for people in their 50s and 60s. Elderflower has been used across Europe for over 2,000 years, in cordials, teas, and tinctures that predated modern pharmacology by millennia. The 2 to 3 weeks per year, it appears, became a cultural event in rural European communities, a fixed point in the calendar that signaled the beginning of summer and the start of preparation for the following winter's cold season. The flowers contain rutin and quercetin, two flavonoids with documented antiviral and anti-inflammatory properties. Quercetin in particular has become one of the most studied natural compounds in current literature for its effect on viral entry and replication. A 2009 study in phytochemistry confirmed elderflower extracts demonstrated significant antiviral activity against influenza strains and certain respiratory viruses. The mechanism is direct rather than systemic. Quercetin appears to interfere with the binding stage of viral infection, rather than simply activating the immune system more broadly. This distinction matters for people whose immune systems after 60 are more variable in their activation speed. Harvest the flowers when fully open and fragrant, before any floret has begun to brown. Steep fresh flowers in hot water for 5 minutes. The tea is floral, gently sweet, and complex in a way that is difficult to describe, but immediately recognizable. 2 weeks per year. It is worth knowing when your local elder trees flower. Number 5. Thyme. Thyme grows in gardens, between paving stones, along dry, rocky paths, often planted once and then largely forgotten, spreading quietly for years without being asked. It was not always a culinary herb. For most of its documented history, it was medicine first and food second. Ancient Egyptians used thyme as an embalming agent, specifically because of its preservative, antimicrobial properties. Greek physicians prescribed it for chest complaints and respiratory infections. During the Black Death in 14th century Europe, bundles of thyme were burned in streets and held to the face as protection, a practice now understood to have delivered thymol directly to the respiratory mucosa through inhalation. Thymol, the primary active compound in thyme, is one of the most studied natural antimicrobial agents in modern research. It is used today as an active ingredient in commercial mouthwashes, wound antiseptics, and food preservation. A 2011 study published in the International Journal of Food Microbiology found thymol effective against antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria, including strains resistant to multiple pharmaceutical antibiotics. For people over 60, respiratory infections carry more consequence. Recovery takes longer. The thymol in thyme has specific documented activity against respiratory pathogens and supports mucosal immunity in the upper respiratory tract simultaneously. Steep a generous sprig of fresh thyme, or a heaped teaspoon of dried, in just boiled water for 8 minutes. Add raw honey. This is the traditional preparation used across European herbal medicine for centuries. The flavor is warm, herbaceous, immediate, It is the taste of something that has been doing this work for a very long time. Number 6. Dandelion. Every part of it is useful. Every part was used. The dandelion's antimicrobial credentials are less famous than its liver-supporting ones, but they are documented. A 2011 study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology found dandelion flower extract demonstrated antimicrobial activity against Bacillus subtilis and Staphylococcus aureus. Dandelion root extract has demonstrated antifungal activity against Candida strains in laboratory conditions. But the mechanism that matters most for people over 60 is indirect rather than direct. The inulin in dandelion root, a prebiotic fiber, selectively feeds bifidobacterium and lactobacillus in the gut. After 60, gut microbiome diversity declines measurably. The populations of beneficial bacteria that regulate immune function, produce short-chain fatty acids, and maintain gut lining integrity shift. Inulin is one of the most effective dietary tools for supporting those specific bacterial populations. The connection between gut microbiome health and immune function is not peripheral. Approximately 70% of immune cells reside in the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. Feeding the microbiome is, in a direct and documented sense, feeding your immune system. Dandelion root tea in the morning, young leaves in salad. The bitter compounds in the leaves additionally support bile production and liver detoxification, two functions that slow with age and affect how efficiently your body processes everything else you consume. It is growing in your lawn. Harvest only from unsprayed ground. Number 7. Oregano. The same compound as thyme, a different plant, a different history, a different mechanism emphasis. Wild oregano, the original, potent Mediterranean species, distinct from the milder cultivated varieties sold in most supermarkets, contains carvacrol alongside thymol. Carvacrol has been the subject of substantial research over the past 2 decades, specifically for its antimicrobial activity against drug-resistant bacterial strains. A 2012 study in the Journal of Applied Microbiology demonstrated that carvacrol disrupted the membrane integrity of several resistant bacterial species, physically breaking down the bacterial cell wall through a mechanism different from that of pharmaceutical antibiotics, which has led some researchers to suggest it may retain activity against strains that have developed resistance to conventional treatment. This is an area of active and legitimate research. The findings are preliminary in clinical terms. What is not preliminary is the traditional record. Wild oregano has been used continuously across the Mediterranean for respiratory infections, digestive complaints, and wound care for over 2,500 years. In ancient Greece, oregano was prescribed for poisoning and infection. The word itself comes from the Greek oros ganos, joy of the mountain, named for where it grew most abundantly and most potently. For use, grow wild oregano rather than the mild culinary variety if possible. The aroma difference is immediately apparent. Use generously in cooking throughout cold and flu season. Steep the fresh herb as tea when dealing with respiratory symptoms. The concentrated oils do most of the work through direct mucosal contact in the throat and upper airways. Number 8. Purslane. Most gardeners spend the summer pulling purslane out of their vegetable beds. Nutrition researchers often wish they wouldn't. Purslane has been eaten for thousands of years across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, India, China, and Central America. Ancient Greek physicians described it as a cooling medicinal food. In traditional Mexican cooking, it remains a valued ingredient known as verdolaga, appearing in soups, stews, and fresh salads. Its reputation has only grown stronger under scientific investigation. Purslane contains exceptionally high levels of alpha-linolenic acid, making it one of the richest known plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids. Alongside those healthy fats are vitamin C, vitamin E, glutathione, magnesium, potassium, and betalain antioxidants. Laboratory studies have also identified antimicrobial activity in purslane extracts against several bacterial and fungal organisms, while additional research continues to explore its anti-inflammatory and immune-supporting properties. For adults over 60, that combination is particularly meaningful. Chronic low-grade inflammation, declining antioxidant defenses, and changes in cardiovascular health all become more common with age. Purslane brings together nutrients that support several of those systems at once. The young leaves have a pleasant, slightly lemony flavor, with a crisp texture that stays refreshing even on warm days. Add them raw to salads or stir them into cooked dishes just before serving to preserve their delicate nutrients. The plant most people mistake for an ordinary weed may be one of the most nutrient-dense foods growing in the entire garden. Number 9. Self-heal. The name is not marketing, it is history. Prunella vulgaris, self-heal, heal all, woundwort, appears by some variation of these names in virtually every European and Asian traditional medicine system that has been documented. It was so widely used and so consistently effective that it earned the same name independently across cultures that had no contact with each other. Medieval European physicians prescribed it for throat infections, mouth ulcers, and wound healing. Traditional Chinese medicine used it under the name Sha Ku Cao for liver support and fever reduction. The convergence across unconnected traditions is, by now, a familiar pattern on this list. It is worth noticing, modern research has focused on rosmarinic acid, a polyphenol also found in rosemary and lemon balm, as self-heal's primary active compound. A 2010 study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology confirmed Prunella vulgaris extract demonstrated antiviral activity against herpes simplex virus type 1 and type 2, as well as influenza strains. A separate analysis identified antimicrobial activity against oral bacteria specifically, consistent with the centuries of use for mouth and throat complaints. After 60, oral health has direct connections to cardiovascular health, a relationship now well established in the literature. The bacteria responsible for gum disease have been found in arterial plaque. A plant with documented antimicrobial activity against oral bacteria is not purely a dental footnote. Self-heal grows in unmown lawns and meadow edges across most of the temperate world. It is easy to miss, low, small-flowered, unassuming. It is often the plant you overlook entirely while pulling something else. Leave it. Number 10. Cleavers. If you have ever walked through a hedgerow and found your clothes covered in small, sticky green burrs that cling to everything, that was cleavers. The plant reproduces by attaching its seeds to anything that passes. It has been distributing itself through the coats of animals and the clothing of humans for longer than agriculture has existed. It was also, for most of that time, considered a spring tonic of the first order. Cleavers has been used in European herbal medicine specifically for lymphatic support, the movement and drainage of lymphatic fluid, which plays a central role in immune surveillance and the clearance of waste products from tissues. After 60, lymphatic function can become sluggish. The results, tissue fluid retention, slow recovery from infection, fatigue, are common and often unattributed to their actual cause. The compounds in cleavers, primarily iridoids and flavonoids, have been studied for mild diuretic and lymphagogue properties. A 2010 study in the Asian Pacific Journal of Tropical Biomedicine confirmed antimicrobial activity in Galium aperine extract against bacterial and fungal strains. The traditional preparation is cold infusion, the young spring stems and leaves steeped in cold water overnight, rather than brewed hot. This preserves the delicate compounds better than heat. The flavor is fresh, mildly vegetal, entirely neutral. Drink it in early spring when the plant is at its most tender. The season for it is short, and the results, as generations of herbalists have noted, are often felt rather than measured. Number 11. Lemon balm. Lemon balm has been cultivated in kitchen gardens across Europe for over 2,000 years. It is one of those plants that has never entirely left the domestic garden. It spreads vigorously, comes back year after year without assistance, and smells unmistakably of lemon when touched. Most people think of it primarily as a calming herb, for sleep, for anxiety, for nervous system support. All of that is documented and real, but the antiviral research on lemon balm is less widely known and more specific. Rosmarinic acid, present in lemon balm in significant concentrations, has demonstrated antiviral activity against herpes simplex virus in multiple studies. A clinical trial published in Phytomedicine found that a lemon balm cream applied to cold sore outbreaks reduced healing time and symptom intensity significantly compared to placebo. A separate study found oral lemon balm preparations reduced recurrence frequency in regular sufferers. Herpes simplex virus, the cause of cold sores, becomes more active and more frequent in people whose immune systems are under stress or whose T-cell response has shifted with age. It is among the most common viral recurrences in adults over 60. The tea is simple: a generous handful of fresh leaves, or a heaped teaspoon of dried, steeped 5 minutes in just boiled water. The flavor is clean, bright, and immediately pleasant. The most drinkable plant on this entire list. Drink it daily through periods of stress or immune vulnerability. Grow it near a path where you will brush against it and release the scent. That is not an accident. It has always been where hands could reach it. Number 12. Rosemary. End with the plant that was never just a herb. Rosemary has been growing in human settlements for so long that its origin is genuinely difficult to establish. It appears in ancient Egyptian, Greek, and Roman records as food, medicine, and ritual plant simultaneously. Its scent has been associated with memory and cultural tradition for so long that the association itself is 2,000 years old. Shakespeare encoded it. Greek students wore it. Medieval monks planted it outside infirmary windows. The antimicrobial research has validated a part of that long tradition with precision. A 2007 study in the Journal of Food Protection found rosemary extract, specifically its carnosic acid and rosmarinic acid content, demonstrated significant antimicrobial activity against Listeria monocytogenes, Staphylococcus aureus, and Candida albicans. Rosemary extract is now used in the food industry as a natural preservative for exactly this reason. Its antimicrobial properties extend shelf life in the same way they inhibit pathogen growth in tissue. For people over 60, the dual antimicrobial and cognitive profile of rosemary is particularly relevant. Carnosic acid crosses the blood-brain barrier and has demonstrated neuroprotective effects in laboratory research. Rosmarinic acid inhibits acetylcholinesterase, the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine, the primary neurotransmitter of memory and learning. Pharmaceutical acetylcholinesterase inhibitors are the current standard treatment for early Alzheimer's symptoms. Rosemary has been doing this in Mediterranean kitchens for 3,000 years without a prescription. Use it generously in cooking through winter. Steep a sprig in hot water as tea. Grow it where it will receive full sun and poor, dry soil, the conditions under which its essential oil concentration is highest. The same conditions that ancient Mediterranean farmers grew it in the same thin, rocky soil, for the same reasons.